Hi.
Hi, the supernatural Kristin Kreuk.
Well, it's true. I mean, if you look at it, like Smallville, Beauty and the
Yes.
Beast, was it a relief to not be so supernatural this time around?
Yeah, I really wanted to do that. I mean, those stories are wonderful, and people are drawn to them for a reason. And they're fun to play. You get to, like you said, you get to do stunts and do crazy things and
Yeah.
imagine the wildest scenarios.
And deep fandom, right? Like
Yeah,
deep fandom.
and that is an experience I don't know that people in straight dramas understand. When you're in genre, you get people who are so dedicated and committed, who dress up as characters, who come out from all over the world to see you. And I don't know if everyone gets that, and it's
Right.
an incredible experience.
And this was intentional. Like you kind of wanted to play it a little bit straighter.
I did. I wanted to, and I think my taste tends to sit more in straighter drama, things that don't exist within genre. And I wanted to explore a story that takes place in a town that could be anywhere in our country or in North America, with problems that are very real and present, versus good versus evil, and kind of epic themes like that.
So I want to recap the show a little bit. You play Joanna Hanley, big city lawyer who goes back to the prairie town she grew up in. So this is a clip from the first episode. This is Joanna's dad, who runs the law firm she works at, congratulating her on signing the big client whose case will bring her back home.
You were amazing, sweetheart.
Thanks. I did talk myself into a ticket to Millwood, though.
No, that's not gonna happen. I'll call Roy and I'll convince him to send Alan.
No, it's okay. I'll go. It's what the client wants.
Yes, but the client can always be persuaded otherwise. I need you here.
It'll only be a couple days.
I wish I could clone you and have one of you in every major city that we do business in. We're really lucky to have you here.
I didn't really have much of a choice, did I?
What are you talking about? Every firm in the city wanted you.
Yeah, but you made a pretty compelling pitch. What'd you say? Your dad and granddad at a general store will have a law firm.
That's a clip from the first episode of Burden of Truth. Kristin Kreuk plays Joanna Hanley on the show, who is a successful lawyer. Kristin, tell me a little bit about Joanna.
Joanna is this woman who has dedicated her life to the pursuit of a career. She is a lawyer, and that's almost all she is. She doesn't really know how to be a person. And she defines herself purely by basically her stats as a lawyer, and also by how much she's like her dad. Her dad is her inspiration, and she has become pretty much just like him. And that's how you meet her. She's just somebody who, after high school, she just put her nose in a book for years and then made her way to partner, and she killed it. But as you get to know her, she just really struggles to relate to human beings. And a lot of that is because she's struggled to relate to herself her whole life.
Do you relate to her at all?
I do. I mean, to a degree, not in the career sense, but Joanna's like, she takes a long time with people. She's cautious. She doesn't trust people easily, and I feel similarly to that. But other than that, I think she is far more ambitious and intelligent and capable than I am.
But did you find, we were talking a little bit earlier about how this was you kind of playing a straighter character than the supernatural characters you played in the past. Is that easier or harder?
I find it easier. You get to kind of play in nuance more.
Right.
I find that the big broad themes that I mentioned before kind of place you in life or death situations. And while the stakes are high and that's really intense, it isn't always, you don't always get a chance, like in Logan, for instance, where they really got into in the movie Logan.
Yeah.
They got into kind of the nuance of character relationships and dynamics, and I don't think that always happens in shows like that. And this show, I get to just live in the nuance of a person who's dealing with things that we all deal with, revelations about her family, questioning her career choices, questioning herself as a human being, if she's even a good person. What is a good person? What does it mean to be a human being in this world?
So when we meet your character, Joanna, she's pretty much entirely focused on her work as a lawyer. You're really focused on your career, too. You started working as a teenager. You put off post-secondary education. Did you ever want to do anything different?
So, like you said, when I was 17, I started working. And I've worked almost up until now, and I just turned 35.
Yeah.
But I went back to school because I wanted to get my bachelor's degree. So I'm taking distance classes at Queen's University.
What are you doing?
Right now? I'm working towards a history degree.
Oh, yeah.
So it's, I mean, I'm loving that, but it's certainly not law school.
How's it feeling going back? I mean, it feels like you put off that part of your life for a long time.
It's great. I mean, I'm doing it from home, so it's different than being on campus, which I think would have been the terrifying thing for me, being around all those people. And now I would feel like just ridiculously elderly with 18-year-olds. But it feels so good to like have books to read and essays to write and ideas to think about and guide the way that I question and look at information. And I mean, that's one of my favorite things to do.
Well, has acting as a lawyer brought to mind any thoughts on your own devotion to acting?
What do you mean?
I mean, it seems like you were pursuing a path for very, very long, and now you're starting to understand there are other things in your path. You want to learn other things. You want to do.
Yeah.
You want to do other things.
Well, I think that maybe I'm not answering this in the way that you mean, but I think that this show is a reflection of my choosing other than I have in the past,
Right.
making a more directed choice. I got into acting very reflexively. It was something that kind of was offered to me, and I took it,
Right.
and I was like, this is easy, and oh my God, amazing. Like, no one gets to do this, and I get to do it. And I think because of that, I didn't have a strong belief in my capacity, and I didn't have a strong understanding of how to shape a career. And after I, make a few mistakes and face that, I was like, I don't want to do that anymore. If I'm going to keep going in this world, and I want to learn to produce, and I want to create stories that matter to me, I want to choose very actively towards the things that represent important stories in my life.
What was the catalyst for that change, you think?
I think that it was just, you make choices in hope that something will work out. And in this business, in the film business, I'm sure in every business, you don't have all the data. No. So you go in and then you learn as you go. And I made a series of choices that I just ended up feeling, I don't know, there's like a feeling that I get when it just, you see that it's gone in a direction you don't want it to go in. And like there's just like a gross feeling in my stomach. Yeah. And I didn't want that anymore. I didn't want to go to work and be like, oh.
You were starting to feel that way a little bit?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. To the point that I really want to step away from being in front of the camera at all and just be behind the camera because I feel like I have a little bit more flexibility that way. But yeah, this show has given me an opportunity to play a character that I really find fascinating. And she's got so many layers to delve into. And I don't fall into, and I think a lot of this is changing now in the current climate, but the story doesn't fall into like a woman who is shaping a man's life or moving him in a certain direction. She isn't the catalyst for another person's growth.
I definitely want to touch on all of that. On your way in, a friend of mine said to me, "Are you going to ask her about Superman? Are you going to ask her about Smallville? And does she not want to talk about that?" And I said, "Well, I'm not entirely sure. I was planning on asking her about it." Can you relate to what he was saying? Is there a part of you that wants to distance yourself from that past a little bit?
I mean, that's hard to answer. Yes and no. I mean, that is where I grew up. I spent 8 years on that show. From the time I was 18 till my mid-20s. It was defining for who I was as a person. That crew and that cast meant a lot to me. That show, for me, was challenging as an actor, playing the character that I played. And in the end, I think she was very redeemed. But for a lot of that show, I was, kind of moved as it's about Clark Kent. It's about him becoming Superman. Yeah. So the character was moved to support that.
So when people come up to you and yell Smallville, you're okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And also people love that show. It means so much to them. I would never say, you shouldn't like that show. They should. They should love it. And I love that they love it. And it's so nice to have people committed to a series like that.
Where are you living these days? Are you in Vancouver?
I'm in Toronto.
You're in Toronto?
Yeah.
Do you get back to Vancouver very often?
Yeah, I just got back, actually. I was there for the holidays.
How is it? Does it feel different now?
I mean, you might have an experience of this because you've moved away from your home also. But when you go back to your hometown, and you've been away, there's a feeling of nostalgia that creeps in that's a little bit different than when you're there every single day. Like every corner means more than it did before. But I love going back, and it's beautiful.
The reason that comes to mind is because your character in this show goes back home, and it's not the same to her either.
Exactly, yeah.
What is it about narratives that focus around the idea of going back home that stand out to you?
Well, it's I think it's about reevaluating kind of the myths of your childhood.
Yeah.
Like, what did we make this thing up to be? I was just talking to someone about this just last week. When you start to like shed light on things that as a kid you were like, oh, I loved that parent, or oh, that couple was so in love when you're like this little person, and then you start to see as an adult, wait, no, it wasn't like that. This was far more complicated than I ever knew, and that then informs every belief that you've ever had about who you are, what you think about the world, your values. And for Joanna, that's exactly what happens when she goes back to Millwood, except for her revelations are very jarring, and it forces her to confront everything that she believes about reality.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Q. I'm Tom Power. I'm talking with Kristin Kreuk, and a star and one of the executive producers of the new CBC drama called Burden of Truth. Executive producer on the show. Mm-hmm. How do you find it?
Good. I mean, it was a really interesting process. I went into E1 with a few ideas of my own, things
This
that
is
I
the production
built.
company that...
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yes. Yes, the big production company in Canada.
Yeah, I've heard of them.
Yeah, really? You have? And they were like, no, we don't like your ideas. But you're...
Hold on, what?
They didn't say it that.
Okay,
They
right.
were,
So you went in with a couple of ideas,
Yes.
and they went, I'm not sure about
No.
that, Kristin, right?
Exactly. And then they sent me. They were like, but we want to work with you, so here are some ideas. And I went through, and this was one of the projects that was in that pile, and I really liked it. So I met with Brad Simpson, who created it, and Lynn Cody, who he was working with. And, you know, I had a great chat with them and eventually signed on to executive produce. We went out and pitched it and went into a develop room, and it just became its own thing. And it went, which was shocking. It happened quickly. And it was, you know, the beginning of it was really fascinating for me because I hadn't done it before, looking at pitch documents for episodes and giving notes on those things and helping to shape the way that the story progressed and who this person was. And then once we got to shooting, I was like, I can't do all this anymore.
No, I wouldn't say. I mean, it seems impossible to balance. You didn't find?
But some people seem to balance it. But I think that for me, I realized that this character was so different than what I'd done before, and I was doing a lot of work on her. I just couldn't. I couldn't give notes on pitch documents and also be on set and work on the character and talk to the other actors and, you know, all that.
So when you got on set, you kind of said, my executive producing days are in the past,
Yes, pretty much.
and I will continue executive producing when this thing is over.
Yeah.
But it must give you a different kind of ownership over the show.
Absolutely. I feel very tied to this show and proud of it, and it feels very much like I'm a part of this team of individuals because there are a lot of producers on this show who are incredibly capable and have had great successes that I've had the chance to learn from.
I want to go back to something you said
Yes.
earlier when you said that this show feels pertinent in this particular climate because it's not a woman telling the story of a man. It's not the woman demonstrating characteristics that would help a male character. And also, you're one of several female executive producers on this show. It's focused again on a young woman. What has all this meant to you?
It's kind of, it's hard to put into words. It just means the world to be able to work with a group of females. I mean, on a very basic level, working with men has been the standard in my career.
Yeah.
Before this show, I probably I could count on two hands how many female directors I'd worked with in my life. And I've worked for a long time. And I have worked with very few female producers. So being able to work with female producers and female writers with a lot of female characters about a show about women was fantastic. And it wasn't a show about a love story. It was a show about these women, and there's a group of them, who are finding themselves and defining their lives.
Can you give me a concrete example of the difference between working in the situation with so many women and not? Something that changed this time around? Something that felt different?
Yeah. Working with, this is hard to, I can't, okay, so personally.
Yeah. It's just something you noticed.
Yeah. So working with men, for me, because I can't speak across the board, obviously, can be challenging because there's underlying patriarchal and misogynistic beliefs. And I don't know how true this is for all women, but I find sometimes working with male executives can sometimes yield like a power dynamic that's difficult to overcome. And depending on who those individuals are, because it's about the individuals, there are beliefs about how women are and how they function that, or how they should behave that are hard to overcome.
Right.
So on this show, that meant that, you know, in a concrete example, there's a moment where Joanna, my character, has a big revelation and transition. And the original scene was written with that transition happening with the male character, that he helped her to make that transition. And because we had a female director, Jordan Canning at the time, and Linda Pope.
Jordan Canning's a good friend of mine.
Yes, Jordan's amazing. I love her. And Linda Pope, who's one of the executive producers, they really fought for it to be a solo moment for this character, that she would make this transition on her own. And that's like a really tangible example of the difference between working with like purely male producers and females.
That must feel so different.
It feels so different. It's so great.
I can just tell from your body language that it feels great.
Yeah, it feels very good. It's it's just such a wonderful thing.
I mean, it's an interesting time, you know, because I was thinking about what you said about this, again, being a story about a woman and not about a story of a woman telling the story of a man. And if you look at, like, the Golden Globes that were just handed out, you have Big
Yes.
Little Lies and Handmaid's Tale and
Yeah.
Marvelous Mrs. Maisel picking up awards. What do you think this means for investment in women-driven shows?
Do you mean practical investment?
Either.
Right. I think that all of the shows that you listed have a ton of audience, that they are critically acclaimed, and have a lot of financial investment. They've killed it. They've done really well. I mean, we could also include films in there, like even Wonder Woman. And I think that means that in the future, these stories will be more coveted. And on top of that, the effect of seeing women in complex human roles where they are just allowed to be who they are kind of shapes the way that we perceive how women behave, and the way that we as a society and as a community process women. And then we can create stories that are reflective of that evaluation that we've kind of experienced in our culture.
So what changes would you like to see here in Canada, if any?
I think in Canada we're moving in a good direction. I think it's still more female writers, more diverse female writers and stories. Female directors, there still aren't enough in Canada. I don't see a lot of them. And I think that has to start with our younger women also and bringing them up. But I think we're moving. I think we're moving in the right direction. We have to keep going that way.
In terms of younger women and bringing them up, you're only in your 30s, but you've been doing this for a while now.
Yeah.
When did you start?
When I was 17.
Oh, my Lord. Does it feel that long?
Sometimes. Yes.
There are days.
There are days.
There are
but
days.
we worked with 18-year-olds on this show.
Yeah.
And that was crazy to see myself kind of reflected, because they're starting around the same time I started.
What did you feel?
Weird, reflective, and really odd, because they are so poised and intelligent, and they have a vocabulary that I never had at that age, particularly around consent and empowerment.
Right.
And I wish that I had had that. These are young women who can very clearly, if something's not within the boundaries that they have set, they're very okay to say no. And I never felt that way. And I don't feel like we were taught the same things that they are taught. But these young women are incredible. It's insane to see the difference.
How does that make you feel? Is it hopeful?
Yeah, hopeful. Absolutely hopeful.
I don't know if you did speak to these young women, but we also have a lot of young women actors and artists and professionals listening to this show. Would you have any advice for them?
Yeah, I think be bold, tell the stories that you want to tell, and find female collaborators who inspire you. And just do it, man. I look forward to seeing these stories. It's reading and watching what young women are putting forward changes the way that I think about the world and think about my place in it, and allows me to see and process what has happened in my life. And they help me to do that, and I really appreciate that.
Kristin Kreuk, thanks for coming in.
Thank you so much.